Good evening and welcome to a very special discussion, an eye on misinformation and disinformation here at the SI Newhouse School of Public Communications. I'm Brad Horn, and I have the great honor of serving as Associate Dean for Strategic Initiatives and as a Professor of Practice in our Public Relations Department. Before we begin tonight, we acknowledge with respect the Onondaga Nation, firekeepers of the Haudenosaunee, the indigenous people on whose ancestral lands Syracuse University now stands. Following tonight's panel discussion, we hope you will join us in the lobby outside of the auditorium for a reception and for a chance to interact with the talented CBS News team who are here this evening. Shortly, you'll meet our panelists and moderator for tonight's discussion, but before we would begin, I'd like to also welcome and extend a very special thanks to the following members of the CBS News and Stations team who are with us this evening. Danielle Dancy, Director of Talent Strategy. Angela Hunter with CBS News Talent Recruitment, Development, and Strategy, Vice President. Carrie Patey, CBS Stations Vice President of Producer Development. Richard Washington, class of 2002, CBS News and Stations Senior Recruiter and Talent Acquisition. And we may be joined tonight by Adrienne Rourke, CBS News and Stations President of News Gathering and Editorial. Thank you all, and thank you to the wonderful CBS News and Stations team for all of your collaboration with this event. Now I'd like to turn the program over not only to our Newhouse Dean, but a very accomplished broadcast journalist himself, Mark Lodato, to welcome our participants and lead tonight's discussion. Dean Lodato.
Thank you very much, Brad. I appreciate it. It's wonderful to have everybody here tonight. I feel that CBS actually holds a little special place in my heart among broadcast journalism. I've worked at 3 different CBS affiliates in my own broadcast career, so this is a lot of fun to be here with this great team tonight, and excited to introduce our 3 panelists that we'll be having a great conversation with over the next hour. I guess I will work from closest across, so Ali, we'll start with you. Ali Bauman is an Emmy and Edward R. Murrow award-winning journalist, currently serving as the Northeast correspondent for CBS Saturday Mornings and the Saturday edition of CBS Evening News. Since joining CBS News in New York in 2016, she's covered a wide range of stories as a general assignment reporter. And prior to that, Ali was a journalist for News 12 The Bronx and News 12 Brooklyn. She, too, is a Newhouse alum, and while attending Syracuse, she was the first undergraduate student accepted to the 2014 Newhouse Graduate Capstone in Washington, D.C., where she served as the Capitol Hill correspondent for WETM-TV in Elmira, New York. Ali holds a dual degree in broadcast and digital journalism and political science at the Maxwell School. So welcome, Ali. Great to have you here. Sitting next to Ali is CBS News correspondent Scott MacFarlane, who has more than 2 decades of experience in Washington, D.C. He's earned 20 Emmy and Edward R. Murrow Awards in his career, as well as the Anna Quindlen Award for Excellence in Journalism from the Child Welfare League of America. At CBS, Scott covers the U.S. Congress, the Justice Department, and major events like Supreme Court hearings and presidential addresses. He reported on the largest criminal prosecution in U.S. history following the January 6th Capitol Hill siege and was on site during the 2024 assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Scott's career includes roles at NBC, Cox Media, and CBS affiliates in Michigan, a graduate of the Newhouse School as well. Scott was an active leader at WJPZ as well as WAER, and he is uniquely honored, I am told, as the only individual inducted into both the JPZ and AER Radio Hall of Fames. So welcome, Scott. Always good to have you back. And sitting next to Scott is Rhona Tarrant. She will be an honorary Newhouse alum by the end of the next 2 days or so. Rhona is executive editor of CBS News Confirmed and is an internationally recognized verification expert and journalist. She has extensive experience in identifying and combating misinformation and disinformation, having trained journalists worldwide through the Google News Initiative and Storyful. At Storyful, she built a team that verified social media footage for major news outlets, and her work on disinformation has earned her fellowships, including one at Harvard, where she researched disinformation and AI. Rhona worked herself in investigations at WNYC Radio in New York and at RTE Radio and Television in Dublin as a producer and reporter. She has a master's degree in journalism from Griffith College in Dublin and a bachelor's degree in new media and English from the University of Limerick. So welcome, Rhona. It's great to have you here. So it's truly wonderful to have all three of you here tonight, and we are going to talk a lot about misinformation and disinformation, but when we look broadly, this is a really challenging time in news. It's been a challenging month. We have a new administration. We've had wildfires in California, and sadly, in the last 24 hours, we've had another breaking news story in Washington, D.C., affecting this newest administration. When you look at covering news in 2025, how do you approach it on a daily basis? Do you have any sense of what you're going to get as the day starts? And this is really just open to anyone. So what your mindset is going into the day today.
I know how to triage. What's most important is how can I contextualize it? How can I make it important to the person I know is watching, reading, or looking at my material? If I can draw a connection between whatever of the 1,000 things broke today and the person I know is in my audience, that's my story. That's what I want to do. And when you have a fire hose of news, which we do at this moment in time, you look for the things that have connective tissue to whoever your audience is. And that's where it's important to know who's watching or who you're targeting, because lots of things happen in Washington, but only some of them impact the moms with 2 kids who watch our nighttime broadcast. Only some of them impact the grandparents who are watching part of our broadcast or listening on the radio. Only some of them impact people of college age who may be watching the videos we curate. We have to know what impacts people. They don't want trivia. They don't want political back and forth. They want to know what actually has a retail impact on their lives. It's easy to figure out how a plane crash impacts people. It's easy to figure out how a cutoff of federal money for Meals on Wheels impacts people. Difficult to know how a spicy confirmation hearing on Capitol Hill impacts people's lives. Makes it easier to choose.
Yeah, I think what's so exciting and terrifying about our jobs is that it's so rare that I know what I'm going to do in a given day when the day starts, especially at local news, where I spend most of the week at CBS New York. And triage is one way to put it. I mean, it's being flexible, and you don't want to be reactive necessarily to everything, but to be able to roll with the punches in so many ways. And as things are coming out and as things are developing, by the minute in a lot of cases, figuring out and keeping that sense of, I guess that true to what we're doing here and what matters most, as Scott is saying, of what people care about, and not getting caught up in, oh my God, this tweet just came out. Oh my God, this is happening next, and developing with what is happening in the day, but also keeping true to what is most important and what impacts people the most.
I think from my side, I actually have a very different job to Scott and Ali. So the CBS News Confirmed team was set up in the last year to kind of bring a different sort of approach, like a new unit that can bring different kind of reporting. So when they're out there, they're giving context. My team has sort of a different role. Now, we're the verification unit. So there's a few things we do. So for example, January 1st, we wake up, there's a terror attack in New Orleans. So they're on the ground, they're interviewing people, they're talking to people. My team sit behind a computer screen and we try to figure out what happened. So there's a few things we do. One, we verify the videos as they're coming out. So we source them from social media, we make sure they're not manipulated, we find out who filmed them, we try to put context to them, and we push that out to CBS News and stations. The next thing we do is we start putting together all the evidence to try to figure out what happened. So for example, in New Orleans, we'll piece together all the videos and create a map. And that will show what actually happened on the evening. Here's where the truck crashed, here's where it entered the street, here's where the bollards were removed, here's where the barriers weren't put out, here's the wedge that was down that should have been up. There were 3 critical pieces of infrastructure that weren't up that night, and this is where they are. So my team really has a role in like anything that's sort of out there online, and then we push that out. Now, why I think that's so important is oftentimes, particularly around, we think of misinformation, disinformation as like just debunking things, right? Oftentimes what you're trying to do is show the audience how you know what you know. So for any of these stories, like, the California wildfires or anything like that, our number one job on my team is how do we piece together all the information to show the audience how we know what we know? The second responsibility for my job is we try to get ahead of what the false claims might be. So for any big event, for example, California wildfires or something else, we know there's going to be a certain amount of conspiracy theories, for example, related to, oh my God, I don't even want to get into them, but they come out every wildfire, during every wildfire. So it's those 2 things. It's piecing together what we know, and it's also trying to get ahead of what is the bad information that comes out and how can we best serve the audience to inform them.
So Rhona, as we transition to talking about mis and disinformation, I think it's important that we're all on the same page. How do you define the two, given that that's your area of expertise?
So misinformation is where somebody says something and it's false, but they don't know it's false. So you hear something from your friend, you repeat it, you think it's true. Disinformation is where you know something is false, but you say it anyway. I try not to use disinformation too much. I think the term oftentimes can be, misinformation, disinformation can oftentimes be overused. So I would really use disinformation for the most part, for example, for Russian influence operations, for example. But actually, it's interesting. There's kind of a new school of thought around this as well, that, we use misinformation, we use disinformation. A lot of researchers are now using the term rumor because they feel like people understand the word rumor a lot more. It's something you hear, you're not really sure if it's true, and that maybe it can be more effective as well.
So obviously a lot of information comes out when a story is breaking, and I'm going to use the plane collision from last night as an example. A new administration is in the federal government, and we had the president frankly implying that somehow DEIA might be involved in what resulted in a mid-air collision within 24 hours of the incident itself. Is that misinformation, disinformation? Is that rumor? How does a journalist begin to chart a course through a challenge when you've got so many different opinions flying into the media space?
I'd be interested in Scott and Ali's opinion on this. So we field requests from CBS News and stations. So we serve everybody. So we'll get emails in being like, I heard the statement, can you fact check that for me? So the number one thing I tell my team is, where did this come from? It's not like batted away, someone releases a statement and they debunk it. Oftentimes with statements that come out, you can trace it back to something. So that is our number one job. So for example, if somebody says, there was DEI policies in the FAA and that may have led to, my team was working on this today. We were looking back at these policies that were on the website. We found they were on the website since 2013. They had been on the website from 2013 up to 2024. So they weren't new policies. So the biggest thing for my team is if somebody says something, give the context about where it came from and help the audience to understand where that came from, because that can often be more powerful than just saying, well, that's actually not true.
So Scott, working in Washington, D.C., you could easily be tasked with, let's chase that down. And to your point, there's such a flood of information. Where do you begin on a day like that?
So one of the complications is when so much happens so quickly, it dilutes your ability to pay attention to any one thing. I think a lot of people have employed that. A lot of newsmakers have employed that. If you flood the zone with information, it makes it more difficult for political opposition, for citizens, and for news media to bird dog all of it. It doesn't matter who the speaker is. You go through the same system of protocols to verify information. Government statements should come with government records. No matter how provocative a statement, there should be something to back it up. And if there's nothing to back it up, no supporting documentation, no supporting data or evidence, that's something we want to specify when we report the statement. But to me, it's somewhat irrelevant if the speaker is a government official, a witness, somebody I pull aside on the street, a person I'm familiar with and have dealt with before. You still want to look for the verification of what he or she says before you share it with your audience, because the value you bring is the brand you have singularly and the brand of your organization. And verification is an important part of the CBS News brand. It's a vital part of the CBS News brand. Our brand has value because we're distinctively good at verifying and having integrity. So you can't just parrot somebody's statement. You have to look for the supporting information and communicate it or communicate the lack of it.
And Ali, from your perspective, you have a difficult balance between local news on one day, covering national stories on another. Does your approach as it relates to verifying information change depending on which hat you're wearing on a given day, or is it, as Scott has said, basically the same process regardless?
Yeah, no, it really doesn't change at all. I mean, so much of what we do is so team-based and so reliant on working with the other parts. So where on a story like what happened yesterday, where Rhona would be the one, on the computer, fact-checking things, finding the records. Scott's the one chasing down the politicians, demanding answers from them. In a lot of cases, I would be the one out on the street trying to find the witnesses, trying to find the family members, trying to find the victims and talking to them. And that's where a lot of, people are telling you what they saw, what they think they saw. They're giving you video that maybe they shot, maybe somebody else shot, and they saw it on social media. And so a lot of it is, yes, gathering the information that people have, and doing the kind of foot soldier work of verifying, if you're giving me information of something, or you're giving me, video of, hey, I took this with my cell phone of this, plane crash happening. How did you find, where did you find this? Verifying that on the ground like that, working with Scott and Rhona to make sure the pieces come together, to make sure that this video, this information is what it appears to be.
I want to interject for a second. There's a reason Ali is supremely talented, because the way Ali speaks right now, the way she's talking to you, is the way she'll talk in the hallway, the way she'll talk on television, the way she'll talk on social media. She uses an authentic voice. That is crazy hard. To speak like your natural self in front of an audience, that's authentic. That takes practice. That's how you can draw an audience. You speak in your authentic voice. That's how you get them in the door. That's how you become compelling. How you keep them is by having credibility and being accurate and being trustworthy. You can welcome people in, but if you don't stand up and become an accurate, verifiable, integral source of information, you will lose them. So it takes a while to develop that skill. It takes a long while for some of us to try to develop that skill. Some get it faster than others. But that only gets people into the front door. To keep them from walking back out, you have to have that unblemished record of integrity.
And can I just say, I'm just verifying right now, I'm not disinterested in what they're saying. Don't become a journalist. This is what's going to happen to you. I have somebody saying, can we sign off on this photograph right now? So that is what I'm doing. It is a non-stop job, particularly this month, which I cannot believe it's still January.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were approving a script over there. I thought it was something like that. I believe it. And you now have me very self-conscious if I'm being my authentic self. So I will do my very best as I sit up here. You mentioned something interesting though, Scott, this idea of representing a network, representing a company that has a tremendous legacy of success going back to Walter Cronkite and long before that. I actually have a letter on my desk from Walter Cronkite, and I think about that, right? The kind of person you want to be as a news person, and how do you want to ensure that you are living up to the best ideals that you can. Is this an obligation of news organizations today to do things like you do at Confirmed and really show that you are going to these great lengths to confirm information if you want to uphold the reputation of a network, and not just CBS, but really in the industry today, given all of the misinformation out there?
Yeah, Scott was talking about the assassination attempt, and being on the ground, that is so critical. It's the bread and butter of what we do. Giving that first person account, being there, talking to people. There's no replacing that. But to add to that, what my team was doing was there was a ton of conspiracy theories after that assassination attempt. And what we have been doing that week for Evening News was piecing together all of the videos into a timeline. So for example, when did he get on the roof? Where was he on the roof? Where were the law enforcement? Where were the Secret Service? Where there was at least a 2-minute warning where people were shouting about this guy being on the roof. Was there a second shooter on the water tower? That was a conspiracy theory. Blurry videos were circulated online. So oftentimes it's not enough to just say, well, officials are saying X, Y, Z. We have to like lay it out for the audience. These are all of the videos. We put them all together and this is what we know from it. So it's not to replace traditional journalism. That is definitely still the bread and butter. But I do think that transparency is so important now, particularly to gain trust.
I had the weight of the world on my shoulders, I felt, representing CBS News at that moment, because I was on television across America 1 minute after the shooting. And I recognized in that high-profile historical moment, the first in 2 generations, I had to be right. I couldn't get this one wrong. Really can't get any of them wrong, but this one, I felt that burden at that moment. Like I have to be immaculate. And I watched back the report, which you could Google, the first minute, and I said a sequence of 3 things that I'm so proud I said. I said, we heard a series of explosions that some of us thought were fireworks. Some of us thought sounded like gunshots. We saw blood from the former president's ear, and we saw him ushered off the stage into a motorcade. We didn't say there was a shooting. We didn't say there was an assassination attempt. We were quite confident that it happened, but we couldn't verify that. That level of caution felt right. And looking back, I recognize if we got that wrong, there's no way of erasing that. There's no way of getting rid of that stain. So that's why we have this principle of integrity and verification. Above all things, it's not important to be first, it's important to be right, because you have the brand on your back.
It's what you see, what you can confirm in the moment, and that's what you report. And I see your socks. I just noticed the nice orange right there. I can
Subtle.
verify. Obviously, there are people who are simply spreading misinformation, frankly, by accident. It's what they see on their feeds or something like that, or maybe not intentionally. Maybe accident's the wrong word. But are the bad actors getting more sophisticated, do you think? Do you worry that somebody's trying to dupe you on a daily basis by the kinds of information that you're running across or trying to verify? Does that play into the way you use your role as a reporter and try and chase down the information?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I think that that's why, yes, you want to go out and you want to gather what is available, but then be skeptical about everything and be skeptical and go through almost the scientific method of trying to prove that this video, whatever the information is what it says it is, because the assumption that, what you're seeing just because, pictures don't lie isn't the case anymore, right? And you have to be able to go through and verify that this is correct before you're putting it out there.
I feel like there's just so many disseminators of information by orders of magnitude more than there were just a few years ago. And people who don't have a good media diet can conflate the bad with the good, and we have to counter that. That's why the brand is so important. The brand of the news organization, you can go there, you know it's good. If you've ever gone to the grocery store and gotten the generic cereal, you know the Fruit Hoops don't taste as good as the Fruit Loops. You know the corn puffs don't taste like the corn pops. There's a reason the brand gives you trust and faith in what you're consuming. That's why it's important to be a good consumer and have a good media diet, so you know the information at least has been verified.
Yeah, and I would just say, for us, people are like, why is the media not covering this? And it's like, because it takes time. We're trying to figure it out. It takes time to confirm these things. Like what I'm doing right now, even just confirming videos or images of victims of a plane crash, it goes through a producer, it might go through an AP, it goes to a producer, it goes to our team, it goes to a standards team. People don't actually realize how extensive this work is, and also even just for fact checking, how extensive it is to figure out, did someone cut a budget? Well, you have to go back through several budgets and actually do that analysis and that work. So it's really it's really important, I think, for people to understand that, how much work actually goes into verifying that information, which honestly just makes us slower. So then the misinformation kind of gets proliferated a lot faster.
Do you feel like you can't keep up?
Always, yeah.
And
so that's why we always have to figure out, what's the main thread? What's the important point for any story? What are the main misinformation threads on what matters to the audience? Basically, we can't fact check everything.
So you know going into the day that we're not going to be able to handle it all. So we really have to pick our battles, right? So I'm curious, obviously we have lots of students here tonight who are excited to hear a little bit about your paths and are probably thinking about what's the roadmap to success. Is there value, frankly, at this level, showing that you understand high-level effort to verify? You know, is there a way to set yourself apart as a job candidate, do you think, in an age of mis and disinformation that is different than it might have been 10 or 20 years ago?
I think absolutely, especially nowadays where everyone thinks they're a journalist in one way or another, right? Whether they're a journalist or not, everyone thinks that they've done the research and they know more than anyone else, right? So it's easy to, seem like a journalist, easy to pretend to be a journalist in a lot of ways, but to actually understand and have the fundamentals of fact checking and of the basics of creating a story and creating, verifying news is invaluable.
There's two ways to get in the door as a content creator, to get noticed as a content creator. The one I mentioned already, that authenticity that Ali specializes in, speaking like yourself, giving an authentic voice will find an audience, but also the enterprise. What are you giving that other people aren't? What's your specialty? What's the topic? What's the story? Or what's the beat you're covering that others don't? What product are you bringing that nobody else brings? That's how you get noticed, how you get hired, how you get employed, how you stay with your audience is through accuracy. They trust you. I've had people come up to me and say, how do I make a niche for myself covering sports? How do I get started? And the sharp ones, the ones who figure it out, find a beat nobody else is covering. I swear to you, I've had people who went and covered the JV soccer in their county, and they found an audience because all the parents, all the coaches, all the kids read his stuff because it was novel, because it was different, because it was something somebody else wasn't covering, because he was accurate. He got noticed. He got traction. Think of that version in whatever your interest area is. What is somebody not focusing on? Can you specialize in it? If you can specialize in it, you can form an audience, and you can keep the audience if you're accurate, if you have integrity.
So we're going to open it up to questions from all of you in a few minutes. But before we get there, I'm curious, as reporters on the street every day, what is it that worries you most going into the day in terms of as you approach your job? Is it the accuracy piece? Is it not being able to get the story that you hope you're going to get? Is it a more traditional worry? I'm curious, because this is a challenging job today, and you do have a lot of responsibility. You're reaching many people across the country and across the world, not to put more pressure, but when you wake up, how do you approach the day? Are you as excited about it as you were years ago?
Well, I will say this. So if you guys can't tell how lucky you are to be able to listen to Scott talk by how he's talking already, I met Scott 10 years ago when I was a student here, and he came and spoke to my class, and I was so taken aback by how inspiring he is that I was like, oh my God, I gotta, talk to this guy afterwards, and he's been a phenomenal mentor and friend ever since. But something you said that I'll never forget is you said, if you're not waking up every day excited about doing this, don't even do it, because it's not worth it. And I was so taken aback by that. And I think about that still, truly, because there are plenty of days that are exhausting, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to go home and forget this day happened. But then the next day, without fail, I'm still grateful and excited about doing it. So yes, I wake up with worries and concerns constantly, but it's not overshadowing the excitement and joy that I fear. Now, that being said, each day can sometimes feel like that TV show 24, where the clock starts and then the whole day is just a countdown clock until your deadline. And in my fear of fears, is it that 5 minutes before air, there's an error and everything washes away and everything goes wrong, and we lose the video, and then there's nothing, and I'm just standing there with nothing to say. Sure, yes, that's a fear. But I think that each hour of the day is a building block on the hour before it, and you're making progress building towards what's going to be the end of the day, which is the show, which is what you're producing at that whatever it is, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 11 o'clock. So I guess where I'm going on a tangent here, but where I'm trying to say is that, yes, there's that fear that, oh my God, that can all go wrong at the last minute, but the fundamentals that you're building on each time, if one step falters, you still have the fundamentals of what you've built throughout the day or throughout the week or throughout the whatever year to rebuild and keep going with it.
There's upsides and downsides to no matter what you choose to do. The upside of this one that we collectively are interested in is any day can provide an adrenaline rush. Some people don't like that. Some people do. I mean, the virtue of being a journalist is that every day is an adventure that is not written until the day begins. And every day can bring excitement. Every day can bring a pressing deadline, which for better or for worse is a shot of adrenaline. Every day can bring some conflict. Every day can bring some criticism. Every day can bring some congratulations. But here's the more fundamental bottom line. You're going into what some days can be a tinderbox, which is a challenge. You have crushing deadline pressure, which is very well analogized to the show 24. That clock ticks in your head all day, and you cannot be late. You have, sometimes, conflict you're covering. People who don't want you there. People who don't want you to say what you're about to say. So you get some pushback. You sometimes have to work as a team. This is a team sport. This is not tennis or golf. So you have to master some interpersonal relationships in a stressful environment. And it clicked to me when I realized what's most important is how I play in the sandbox, not the granularity of my report. It doesn't matter how perfect or imperfect what I do looks on TV. It's not so important the artistry I execute today. What's most important is how well I carry myself in the adrenaline rush and in the stressful environment. And I pledge to you, unequivocally, you will be employable, you will get promotions, you will get raises, you will get to live anywhere you want in this world, you can travel the world, you can be anything you want to be if you master playing well in the sandbox. That's a priority. That makes you incredibly valuable because every day, for better or for worse, has an adrenaline rush.
It's so true. I mean, my deadline right now is evening news, so like you're just constantly on a clock, and I think that question about the fear is so important. I verified a video last night. I've been verifying stuff for 8 years, like specializing in this. I verified that video of the plane crash. I just had nightmares I was wrong all night long, woke up in the morning and had to double check. That fear just doesn't go away because I just feel that responsibility so much. But I will say, when I'm hiring on my team, I look for people who have that fear because it makes them think. It makes them, what am I missing? What have I gotten wrong? You know, for example, someone says somebody cut a budget. Okay, let's try to find every budget. Let's see, like, what are we missing? What are we missing? I really appreciate that fear. What I fear are people, hiring people who don't fear things and just kind of send stuff off. So I think you can use that to your advantage as well. But you definitely have to like enjoy that as well.
So we can start putting anxiety on our resumes under
Yes.
skill set?
Yeah.
Great. That's wonderful. So many new career opportunities. I'll be honest with you, it's really inspiring hearing what you have to say. I get asked a lot, do you ever miss the business? 9 times out of 10, not a lot. I love my job, but the three of you have great energy, and it does make you want to dive in and be really good journalists, so that's fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions from the rest of our audience, if that works for everybody. I've got some more I can ask, but I also want to make sure that all of you have a chance to get your questions in before we wrap things up. So why don't we start with this mic? You can use this. Who's got a question?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ben Bassick. I'm a sophomore broadcast journalism major. My question's for you, Rhona. When it comes to kind of this like investigative line of journalism, where does like your line end and law enforcement and like work with the Bureau begin? That government agency work versus you can only do so much, like using your capacities. Do you ever turn to government? What does that kind of relationship look like?
That's a really good question. So when I started, so my unit is not even a year old. And when I was setting up the unit, I was like, oh my God, they're going to hate me. Like, I'm like the new person. We're like this new team. Everyone at CBS has been super amazing. So I will say like the type of investigative work that we do really complements the other teams. So for example, the CEO shooting in New York, for example, in December, we were building all of the open source information. So the open source information is videos from the scene, any kind of social media video, anything we could get on the suspect's life from his social media posts, his Reddit. And then we work with our colleagues on crime, so the senior producer for that, and they build in their sources. And I was just saying this as well. When we'll often get tips as well from the reporters on the ground, and they'll ask us to dig into it. So we sort of feed into that stuff that they're doing. So for example, during the California wildfires, they might hear that, or New Orleans, let's say, for example, somebody on the ground might hear, hey, there was a report warning that Bourbon Street was going to be, was vulnerable to an attack. Then my team will go out, will find all the public documents that are out there and put that together in a report. So they really work together very well.
Sorry, this was a bit of a hike.
Hi, I'm a professor here, a professor of practice here, and I was wondering, Rhona, if you could speak for a moment about what kind of technology you use. How do you actually verify? Are there multiple sources of verification that you use? Is it based on GPS? Could you just get a little specific about it?
That is a great question. So CBS has actually invested in quite a lot of technology related to AI-generated content. So we have my team testing all of the tools out there on the market. We have a tool that we use that detects AI generation. However, I will say for the most part, 99% of the misleading content we deal with is not AI. So we actually don't get to use these tools in our daily work yet. We will get there, but yet. But the majority of what we're dealing with is misleading content. Now, what I mean by that is, for example, you post a video from a wildfire in 2013, you relabel it as the wildfire in 2024, you get loads of views and clicks and you get an audience. So my team actually uses we use open source techniques. So there are 3 things we look for when we try to verify something. Source, where did this come from? Can we find the original poster? Can we find the person who filmed this? Location, so we use geolocation. So what that means is we look for buildings, we look for anything, and then we line it up with Google Maps, and we try to confirm for sure where something was filmed. The third thing we do is date. So when we're trying to confirm a date, what we do is we look for any other videos from this day, from the scene that show the same thing so we can corroborate it. We look for official statements. We look for local news reports because they're always closer to the story. And then we'll also analyze metadata from files as well. So we use a combination of techniques. The one thing I tell my team is, you have to learn all the little tools. There's hundreds, thousands of them out there, but it's about figuring out how to get to the information faster. So yes, AI is going to become a bigger problem, but I will say the majority of what we're doing is just kind of old-fashioned journalism, really.
And that's a good point. These are all skills that we all can develop, but it's using the time and knowing to go the steps through the process that really makes it valuable. Right. So those are skills that you can take into any newsroom really around the country. You may not have a whole team behind you, but you're a good reporter. You can figure that out.
If you learn those skills, you will get hired anywhere. When I was leaving my broadcast job at RTE, I was a reporter and a producer, and I'd worked so hard, and I was like, I'd made it, like, woo! And I got offered this job at Storyful, which was like a backwater in Dublin, and I was like, oh, do I want to go? And I went into the news editor, and I was like so torn, and he was like, if you go to Storyful, you can work in any newsroom in the world. And I will tell you, I would not be at CBS News if I hadn't gone and learned those really, and it was so boring learning the skills. It was so dull. I hated it. But it was really, really worth it. So I will say invest in those skills. It is so important.
Quickly, you mentioned working in another country. Are the problems we're facing here the same in other countries? Is it exacerbated because we have such a wonderful First Amendment that makes our challenge more difficult in some ways? I mean, how do you?
It's just you guys. It's just you.
Just us?
Yeah, things are great in Ireland. I was doing puppy stories. It's the same. It's the same everywhere. It's the same. Although I will say, in the States, the First Amendment definitely does make a difference. In Ireland, we have much stronger libel laws. I actually really appreciate the First Amendment impact here, because you can actually just say a lot more things. For example, in Ireland, it's much more difficult to get stories published, particularly about individuals. But I would say the problems are the same pretty much everywhere.
Other questions? We'll work our way back down.
I got a quick question. Are the 5 W's of journalism still in effect with at least 4 sources before you go with the story? the who, what, when, where, and why.
Yeah, it's just we're moving at a faster pace. So the fundamentals don't shift, Dr. Wright. I mean, the same type of sourcing, the same type of verification, but the audience now has so many alternatives. You have to use tools like Rhona offers to move at a more efficient clip. I mean, we don't have the luxury of waiting till tomorrow morning's newspaper or tonight's 6 p.m. news. We have to report information in real time, which is a burden, but it's also an opportunity. We don't have to wait until tomorrow morning's paper or tonight's 6 p.m. news. But those fundamentals don't shift. Those fundamentals don't exist for bad purveyors or inaccurate purveyors of information, of which we can find on social media at the drop of a hat. But those who prioritize verification are the ones who will sustain an audience in the long term.
I can definitely say, because I'm here getting 2 and 3 sources for photographs, so definitely.
What photograph are we working on? Can you give us take us inside just a little bit? What's the topic?
Well, so my team oftentimes for any of these big breaking news stories, we would confirm the photographs of the suspects or the victims in any incident. So today, obviously, it's with the plane crash. Evening News is going out shortly, and CBS News has the most rigorous standards. So everything goes through multiple layers. And my team is down 3 people with off sick today. So, so my apologies.
No, we appreciate it. What's next?
Hi, my question's for Ali. I'm Charlotte. I'm a freshman magazine news and digital major. So you said you work with a lot of like real life sources, on the ground victims and families after something happens. What have your takeaways been from that type of work about like how far to push a source and when it becomes not ethical to really like push them to talk about something that's just happened to them?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's a constant. It's an art, not a science, for sure. Because it's a balancing act with pushing people and you know, so much. A lot of the days I'm meeting people on the worst day of their life, or I'm asking them to talk about the worst day of their life, and that's very difficult to do, and to gain that trust and to also know that balance of, all right, yes, we do want to talk to someone who has a direct impact on the story. You want to, of course, talk to someone who has been, lost someone on the plane crash, for example, but to also be a human with that and to never lose your humanity when you're doing this job, and to understand, when you knock on someone's door, you get a lot of different reactions. I've gotten the whole range of reactions. There are people who are so grateful that I'm there because they want to share their story. I've had people, countless times slam the door in my face, and everything absolutely in between. And I think that as journalists, or at least for myself, all I know is that what I can do is I can explain to someone the importance of why I'm asking them. I'm not just asking them, and I'm not just bothering them on this terrible day in some case because I feel like it. I'm doing it because I want to give someone an opportunity to share, whether it's about someone that they've lost, or to share their experience of something, and to give them that chance, and to have an impact by whether it's telling someone about someone that we've lost, or by something that's terrible that's happened. By sharing that firsthand experience is so important. Explaining that to people who maybe aren't thinking of that in that moment in their grief or whatever. And if they say no, then that's okay. That's all I can do. I give them, I give them my card, I give them my number, and I say, if you change your mind, let me know. But I'm not going to be not pounding on someone's door again and again and again when they've told me, get out of here, right? Especially when it's someone who's been a victim of something. And then in terms of sources of whether it's, police sources, law enforcement, sources that aren't victims per se, that's also a balancing act, because you want to be staying, on it and relying on them, but it's also, hey, every single little frivolous thing, I don't want to be bothering them at 2 o'clock in the morning just to get something confirmed by 4 necessarily. So that human skill is what's most important, and is why I don't think our jobs are going to be replaced by AI anytime soon.
Can I add to that just a moment? If you can expand on that for them. Talk to them about listening, because once you get that permission, that gift of being allowed in their door, the difference between the excellent reporter getting an excellent human interest story is being patient, which is industry when we're always on the clock.
Absolutely. That is, I'm glad, thank you for bringing that up because, I mean, it's all listening, right? That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. It's not talking at someone, it's listening and receiving what they're saying and not, advice that I got when I was here as a student was not to pre-write a story before you get the interviews. Don't write it in your head and think what you're gonna do and then just plug in the sound bites because that's, I think, the worst thing you can do because then you're not accurately telling someone's story. You're fishing for them to say something that you can then apply to what you've already decided was the story in your head. So to be able to take what they're saying, take the intent of what they're saying, not just, oh, here, they said this one sentence, I'm gonna take it out of context and put it, to take the intent of what they're saying and use that and form the story around that in a sense is so crucial and is what makes CBS News so reliable, is not misconstruing something and not, creating a narrative that you want versus what the person is telling you. And also, again, to that human level, at the end of the day, most stories that I put together are what, a minute, 45 seconds, 2 minutes. It's the conversation you're having with people is going to be a lot longer than that. And I think, at least for me in practice, being able to have a real conversation, not just be like, all right, I got the soundbite I need, okay, I got to go, but to just take the time and have the conversation, talk to them, and yeah, you're not going to use everything they're saying in the story at the end of the day, but you're going to use the context, you're going to use the feeling, you're going to use the full scope of what they're saying to inform the sound bites and the words that you do choose.
All right, another question.
Hi, I'm Madison Diaz, and this question is kind of for all of you. Going into this industry, we're bound to be making mistakes. So what are your biggest, or what is your biggest mistake, and how did you overcome it, or how did you learn from it?
Scott, you go first.
Madison. What are you doing to us, Madison? Yeah. First of all, I'm going to answer your question, but let me say directly. There's never been a better time to go into this industry. Don't let anybody tell you differently. There are positions. Organizations are hiring. We are especially hungry for new talent with fresh perspectives, fresh eyes on old problems, fresh eyes on new issues. Also, people who have a versatility in their skill set, which, because you're in this program, you're going to have. There's never been a better time to go chase a communications profession. And I couldn't say that 15 years ago. I couldn't say that 20 years ago. So revel in that for a moment. But also, you have to embrace the imperfections of journalism because, as Ali alluded to, this is not straight science. This isn't calculus. There's not a right answer and a wrong answer. There's not a provable truth to some of what we do. We have to verify facts. But so much of this is artistry. And I'm going to run a quick example I like to run. Let's think about 4 possible things happening tonight. Work with me on this hypothetical, Madison. One possibility, let's just pretend Day Hall shut down because of a water main break, and everybody has to move out tonight. That's one possibility. Let's say the second possibility is Syracuse decides to extend the school year a whole month. For all students, y'all got to be here till mid-June. That's possibility number 2. Possibility number 3. Every pharmacy in Onondaga County closes because of a database problem. All shut down indefinitely. And the 4th possibility is that the dining halls have to close till the weekend. You tell me what's the most important. Anybody have a definitive, provable answer to which one of those 4 is most important? Or does that answer depend on who your audience is? For your grandparents, do you think they care about Day Hall? Or do you think they care that every pharmacy within 50 miles is closed indefinitely? How about the students who live in Day Hall? Do you think they care about the dining halls right now? They don't know where they're going to sleep tonight. How about the students who have meal plans and don't live in Day Hall? What's most important to them? So some of this is art. Some of this is editorial choices, which we get debated in the newsroom, sometimes for too long each day. Some of this is a discussion you have with your teammates. Sometimes this is you trying to figure out who's my audience on this platform. Who's my audience at this hour? Has it shifted? If so, my choice shifts. So Madison, the mistake you make is thinking that every part is provable science. There is an art to this. And one of the reasons why you're in demand at this moment, why this is a great time to join this industry, is because you have fresh eyes and fresh perspectives on what's important and how to find an audience. None of those things actually happen.
Yeah, we can't follow that. We can't add any more.
Those are all made up.
Hi, this question is for Ali. My name is Amaya Howell. I'm a magazine digital journalism student, but also majoring in policy studies. And I'm just wondering, as a reporter with amid the changing policies, do you have any advice, how you put your personal beliefs and your work aside, how you different that and how you, don't put your personal beliefs in your work?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's so important to everything we do is to not come into a situation with bias and to be as objective as possible. And the truth of it is that, listen, every person comes at every situation with some kind of perspective. You have two eyes, two ears, you come and you see what you see from your own perspective at the end of the day. So to be fully have zero subjectivity is almost impossible because you're seeing what you see, you're seeing it from the perspective that you have in your life. But I think it's important to not let your bias or your perspective educate what you're reporting on, what you're doing, and to put your own opinions on things to the side because of that reliance that the audience has that we are telling them objective facts and leading it with facts. So I think that the most important thing you can do in that situation, in every situation actually, is lead with the facts. Say, all right, what do we know? What do we have here? What are the objective truths that I'm putting in this story? And then how am I putting that together to create some kind of story that you can even follow with for an audience. So leading with facts, I think, is in my opinion the only way to do that.
I always like to get a second set of eyes too, sort of
Yes.
a gut check.
Mhm.
Sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah, of course.
All right, let's keep on. We got lots of hands. We'll try and get through. We'll go a little extra.
First of all, thanks for coming. I'm Carson. I'm a BDJ major and an economics major as well. Scott, you kind of mentioned the ever flowing stream of information, whether it be on social media, digital, or on broadcast television. Really, a question for all three of you: how do you sort of differentiate? What's sort of your moral compass on what you're putting on broadcast television, what your report's going to be on social, or what it's going to be on digital? Is there really a needle? Is there a right answer?
Yeah, I mean, for me, usually I cover one story for the day, and I'm creating that, or I'm putting that story out on multiple different platforms. I'm doing it for broadcast. I'm doing it for, the streaming network. I'm doing it for social media as well. And it's not that I'm doing something so drastically different about the story that changes with the medium that it's going out with. It's more of just the way you're telling it, the way you're having the conversation. So with broadcast, of course, you're spending all day putting this piece together that's very polished and recorded and for a package it's fully done and very polished essentially. Whereas in social media, how often do we now especially are doing kind of more of a debrief and doing more of a casual conversation because that's what the audience wants on that platform. As Scott was saying, it's what is most important is how you're speaking to the audience that you're speaking to, and how you communicate most effectively to that audience is by speaking in that language, so to speak. So on broadcast, it's very much the polished product of a package. On digital, sometimes it can be more of a conversation, a back and forth, a Q&A type session. And on social, it is that more hey, let me explain to you what's happening. It can be more off the cuff, still telling the facts. The facts about it don't change. The story doesn't change. It's just how you're communicating it does.
My name is Hannah. I'm a freshman studying BDJ. I was wondering if there's any sort of a difference between reporting in sports versus politics when it comes to battling misinformation.
That is a very good question. That is such a good question. I think why it's such a good question because it goes to the heart of like, do you change your approach when you're working on one type of journalism versus another? In my experience, no. I think there are sort of a few things, and I actually had a very short-lived, terrible career as a sports reporter for about 3 months, so I feel I can really speak to this with authority.
Tell us more about that.
There's not a lot to say, to be honest. It didn't last long. I was found out. To be honest, I don't think so. And so in my team, so my team does, we do everything from, we fact check live debates as well, for example. But then we also might be, for example, like working on stories that are not political. So we try to take the same approach to everything. Always try to track back, particularly if it's misinformation, try to track back where the source of that is coming from. So really explain to the audience how it showed up. So did it come from a line in a budget one time that got taken out of context, got repeated and got turned into whatever? And then I also think it's important to speak to who is saying the message, who is telling the message. Do they have a vested interest in potentially misleading? So I think for my team anyway, at least, it's always the same approach, whether we're working on like a very, very silly story to, something where there's high stakes and it's, political fact checking on a debate, always taking that same approach of just being like very straight with the audience, very clear. They don't need flowery language, just speak very clearly and straight to them and just really explain to them how something came. I think the how is important as well.
Hi, my name's Sophia O'Brien. I'm a freshman BDJ major. I just wanted to know how you differently go about verifying and broadcasting things that are seen as disinformation versus what things are seen as misinformation.
Oh, that's such a good question. So misinformation, we try to pick out what are the main themes of misinformation that could have a genuine, real impact on somebody's life. So for example, after a big natural disaster, there's misinformation about the recovery efforts that might impact choices someone's really going to make. We will focus on putting out real information, so like highlighting and amplifying the good information. For disinformation, I think it's a different approach. You have to be very direct and very clear with the audience. I very rarely use the term disinformation unless it's like, it really, really reached that bar. So for example, ahead of the election last year, the presidential election, so Russia loves putting out fake videos. They do it all the time. It's one of their main hobbies. But most of the time you don't hear about it because we ignore it, right? It's the oxygen of amplification. So if my team reports on every time they put out a fake video, they're getting exactly what they want. So authorities will ignore it, we'll ignore it, researchers will track it, and they'll, whatever. The problem coming up to an election is Russian disinformation groups are publishing videos that are going to potentially mislead voters and have a real world impact. So what do you do in that case? You have, on one hand, the oxygen of amplification. On the other hand, you have sunlight as a disinfectant. So for example, if you call it out, there is a possibility that fewer people are going to believe it, people are going to understand the tactics, and they're also going to maybe be less prone to believing it. Now, before the last election, we saw a number of fake videos released by, or fabricated videos released by Russian disinformation groups, for example, claiming that people were voting multiple times in Georgia, for example, or tearing up ballots in Pennsylvania. So how my team approached that was forensically going through and saying, this is how we know the video isn't real, this is the group that put it out, this is how they put it out, and this is why they're doing it. And I'll finish with this. It's never an easy decision because you basically just have two bad choices on when you report on disinformation. When you are, the good side of reporting on these Russian fake videos is that you are going to inform the audience, they're going to be more knowledgeable, they're going to see this on social media and they're not going to believe it. On the other hand, you may be giving Russia exactly what they want. They may want CBS News to be covering their tactics and to be covering their videos. So there's no easy choice there. It's just a judgment. And the FBI and lawmakers also face those same decisions as well. You don't see the FBI now releasing statements about these videos. They just leave them alone. So there's never an easy decision. Like it's sometimes it's a little bit of a lose-lose.
I'm going to jump in real quick. And you got me thinking on something. You all are doing great work and going to great lengths to confirm the information. Other news organizations try very hard also, but there are also some news organizations, or at least claim to be news organizations, that don't go to the same lengths. Do you worry about the impact that is having on the industry and the practice of journalism, or is that just the reality today and you just have to do the best that you can do?
I view it as an opportunity to have your brand stand out. If others are going to perpetuate bad information or not verify, that gives you an opportunity to solidify an audience which is starving for something they can believe in. When you get this tsunami of information and you want to discriminate, what should I believe of all these conflicting things I'm hearing? It's an opportunity to be the brand that verifies. The audience will find you and they'll stay with you.
All right, we've had some really good questions tonight. Where is a student with one more really good question?
Hi, how are you guys? My name's Ronnie. I'm a broadcast journalism senior. And a question that I have, I think, can apply to a lot of people in this room, and it's, what's one thing that you wish you knew when you graduated college that would be a good piece of advice for us to know as we enter into the broadcast journalism industry?
There's a lot I wish I knew. I think, something that I really had to learn in my first few years after graduating is not being afraid of looking dumb sometimes, because it's such a vulnerable job, especially, every aspect of it is such a vulnerable job, especially when you're out in the field like I am. People are watching because people, there's so many eyes and attention on the media, and just even the physicality of carrying a camera on a tripod is clumsy as hell. It's a very attention-grabbing job in a lot of ways, and it doesn't pay to be too, modest in certain ways. It doesn't pay to be too embarrassed in certain situations. And what we're doing in so many situations, of course we want to go in every story knowing the most and knowing everything, but at the end of the day, we don't know everything. That's why we're doing the story, because we're asking the questions. And so there's going to be times where you're asking someone who is an expert in a certain field a question that they think is the dumbest thing they've ever heard because they're an expert in that field. I'm not an expert in that field, so I have to ask kind of the pedestrian question that the audience also would have. So not being too, I guess, prideful, I don't know if that's the right word, but just being, having the humility to be like, hey, if I look silly here, if I feel silly, it doesn't matter because it's paying off, because I'm the proxy almost for these questions and the questions that the audience has in certain situations.
I love the question, Ronnie, because I get to reemphasize my previous point. The most important part of your day, I wish I knew this when I got started. The most important part of your day is not the perfection of the product you put out, the content you create. Your bosses will remember you not for the sophistication of your art, but for how well you handled your teammates. How good a citizen were you in the organization? Did you get along with everyone? Did you let some type of tension go? Did you carry yourself as somebody people want to work with? Are you a good teammate? That gets you your next opportunity. That keeps you around. The imperfect on-camera blemish, the imperfection in how you buttoned up your writing, that's not your day. Your day is how well you handled your teammates.
Totally agree with all those points. I would say the thing I wish I knew was don't be afraid to fail a lot. So on my team, I would say there are half the team I would categorize in. So in America, you guys have a lot of internships, and you get to go to the great school like this, and you go to you get the best internship, and you go to the best news organization, you get the next job, and you're going up and up and up. And sometimes I think when I talk to young people, they feel like if they're not doing those things that they're never going to succeed. And I would say those things are fantastic. And, if you can do that, fantastic. But I would say don't be afraid to do something a little bit different. So on my team, I have people who've done that and they're doing super well, high achievers. I also have people on my team who are among the best in the business, who went very untraditional paths, who walked away from jobs at a certain time, who came back in. So for example, James Laporta on my team was a Marine in Afghanistan, and he, served very honorably for a long time, went back, did journalism, and now at CBS, he's someone who has a real deep expertise. I was in a job I loved in broadcast journalism. I was a reporter. I stepped away from that to do something kind of risky, to go learn a really deep skill. I didn't like it for a long time, but I learned to love it, and now I love it. And I think at certain points in my career, I was kind of feeling like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that, or maybe I'm not doing the right thing. Your career is very, very, very long. So I would just say the biggest thing is perseverance and keeping your passion for it. So just don't be afraid to take risks, and there's always new opportunities. You just have to kind of believe in yourself.
All right, I think those are all wonderful answers to wrap things up with. So who is excited to get into journalism? I'm going back in. I'm going back. So big round of applause. Thank you so much, Rhona. Wonderful to have you here, and thank you so much to both of our alums. We're very proud of the work you both do, and so glad to have the CBS team. Everyone, you are invited to the reception in the Herg lobby, so come on out. All of our CBS team will be out there, and I'm sure they will welcome some follow-up questions from all of you. Thanks, everyone.